The heavy wooden front door clicked shut with a sound that seemed louder than usual. I stood there, staring at it, unable to move. My small fingers clenched the necklace I had begged my mom to let me borrow for the big day. But there was no big day. Not for me. I wasn't going to my brother's wedding. I wasn't even allowed to say goodbye. My name is Madeline Carter. I'm the youngest of 5 siblings in the Carter family of Savannah, Georgia. My brothers Daniel, Lucas, and Samuel, and my sister Melanie were all at least a decade older than me. From as far back as I can remember, I was the forgotten one, the extra, the afterthought. When I was 5, Daniel left for college. Lucas followed soon after. Melanie became a high school queen bee who barely acknowledged my existence. Even Samuel, the youngest of the older kids, treated me more like a nuisance than a sister. But I still love them. When you're the baby, your siblings are gods. I used to think Daniel hung the moon. Lucas was cool and mysterious. Melanie was everything I thought I wanted to grow up to be. And Samuel, well, at least he sometimes smiled at me. I idolized them even as they barely noticed I existed. Then came Daniel's wedding. I was 10. 10, the age where you believe you're just grown up enough to be included. I had never been more excited. I imagined the dress I would wear, the flowers, the music. I even snuck into my mom's jewelry box and held up one of her pearl necklaces, begging, "Can I wear this for the wedding, Mom?" She sighed heavily before sitting me down. I remember her words like they were burned into my memory forever. "Daniel and Sophia are having a child-free wedding, sweetie. You won't be going." At first, I thought I misunderstood. I wasn't just a kid who would throw tantrums or scream during vows. I was his sister. I looked at her, confused. "But I'll be quiet, I promise." "I'm not like other kids." She smiled softly and patted my head like I was a puppy. "You'll understand when you're older." I didn't understand. Not then. Not ever. The day of the wedding, I sat at home with a babysitter while my family left without me. I stared at the clock, picturing every moment I was missing. I imagined Sophia walking down the aisle, Daniel smiling proudly, my parents taking pictures, and me, locked away at home like I didn't even belong to them. When they came back from their honeymoon, I waited for Daniel to say something. Anything. I thought he would apologize, or at least tell me some funny story from the wedding. But he didn't. He acted like I hadn't even existed that day, like I had no right to have been hurt or even remembered. That was the first time I realized I didn't matter to them. Not in the way they mattered to me. I had spent my childhood desperately trying to be noticed by the people I loved most. And in one cruel, silent decision, they told me I wasn't part of their world. I didn't know it then, but that was only the beginning. 2 years passed. I told myself Daniel's wedding had just been a misunderstanding, that surely my family would remember me next time. When Lucas got engaged, I was 12. I had matured. I was quiet, respectful, the good kid. I didn't throw tantrums anymore, didn't whine. I worked so hard to prove I deserved to be included. When my parents gathered us around the kitchen table one afternoon to share Lucas's big news, I smiled wide, genuinely happy. Maybe this was my chance. Maybe I'd finally feel like I belonged, but I should have known better. "Lucas and Claire want a child-free wedding too," my mom said casually as she passed the salad. "I hope you understand, Madeline." I froze, my fork halfway in my mouth. Understand? Understand what? That my presence didn't even count as family? That my heartache didn't matter to them? I swallowed my pride and nodded politely, excused myself from the table, and cried silently in my room. This time I refused to beg. I was determined to act mature. But the pain dug deeper than it had before. The message was clear. I was still invisible. At 15, when Melanie announced her engagement, I dared to hope again. For once, there were no initial plans for a child-free event. I overheard her talking excitedly about colors, flowers, music. I stood on the sidelines, heart racing with cautious optimism. Then the whispers began. My aunts and uncles, so proud of their opinions, kept saying at every family dinner. It's so refreshing when weddings don't have kids running around. Children just ruin the elegance. Imagine how peaceful it will be without the chaos. Eventually, Melanie caved. One afternoon, she pulled me aside and delivered the news like it was a favor. We decided, no one under 16. It keeps things fair. I stared at her in disbelief. 16. I was 15, so close I could practically taste it. Please, Melanie, I whispered. I'm your sister. Can't I just be an exception? I'll be invisible, I swear. She looked me dead in the eye, her voice cold and final. If I make an exception for you, what about the other kids? It wouldn't be fair. Fair. The word tasted like poison. I exploded, unable to contain the rage that had been simmering inside me for years. It's not fair that I've been shut out of every one of your weddings. I'm not just some random kid. I'm your sister. The shouting brought my parents rushing into the room. I'd barely registered my mom scolding me, my dad grounding me. 6 months, 6 full months for causing drama and disrespecting your sister. 6 months locked in my room, stewing in a mix of humiliation, fury, and heartbreak. By the time Samuel got engaged when I was 17, I didn't even bother asking. I already knew what was coming. The announcement was made over brunch one Sunday morning. Samuel and Anna are having an adults-only ceremony, my dad said without so much as glancing at me. I didn't react. I didn't cry. I didn't protest. I just stared down at my plate and let the words float past me like they meant nothing, even though they meant everything. But the final blow came later that week when I found out through my cousin Caroline that Amanda, another cousin who had just turned 18 a few months before me, had been invited. I stood frozen, the irony sinking in like ice. Amanda had barely crossed the threshold of adulthood, but that magical number was apparently enough for her to be considered worthy of attending a Carter family wedding, while I remained on the outside looking in. When my parents asked why I hadn't texted Samuel congratulations, I gave a hollow smile and shrugged. I typed a cold message, "Congrats. Hope it's a great day." Then I locked myself in my room as I had done so many times before. Somewhere along the way, something inside me started to break. The childlike hope that my siblings would one day recognize me as their sister slowly turned to cold indifference. I realized I didn't matter to them. I had never mattered. I was just the extra kid they tolerated out of obligation, and even that had limits. The silent rejection had become my normal, and it hurt in a way I couldn't even put into words. But I would learn later that pain would become my strength. I stopped caring. Or at least, that's what I told myself. After Samuel's wedding, I detached completely. No more waiting for invitations, no more desperate hope to be included, no more pretending that I was part of something I never belonged to. I stayed away from family events, ignored the group messages, and withdrew into my own little world of books, school, and working part-time at a small flower shop downtown. I convinced myself that I was fine, but every birthday, every holiday, every family milestone, I was excluded from still stung like a fresh cut. Then came Noah. We met at the flower shop. He was helping his sister plan a wedding, of course, and kept fumbling over the names of flowers. I laughed as I corrected him, the first genuine laugh I'd had in months. There was something about him, kind eyes, warm smile, and a quiet attentiveness that no one else in my life had ever given me. It started with casual conversations over coffee, then long walks along the historic squares of Savannah. Slowly he became my safe place, someone who listened without judgment, someone who actually wanted to know me. One evening, as we sat on his apartment couch, watching the sun set over the river, I finally opened up. I told him everything. About Daniel, Lucas, Melanie, Samuel. About the weddings. About the countless times I had been left behind. I tried to make it sound casual, like it didn't bother me anymore. But I couldn't hide the way my voice cracked when I said, not once, not even when I was 15. They never thought I deserved to be there. Noah sat in stunned silence, shaking his head slowly. Wait, They didn't invite you to any of their weddings? Not even when you begged?" I nodded, staring at the floor. "What the hell?" he muttered. "You're their sister. That's seriously messed up." His outrage shocked me more than my own sadness ever had. I had spent years telling myself it was just how things were, that I was being dramatic to feel hurt. But Noah didn't see it that way. He stared out the window for a moment, then looked at me with that calm certainty I would grow to love. "Madeline, that's not normal. That's cruel. I don't care how much older they are. They made you feel like you weren't even part of their family." Something inside me shifted. The years of silent rejection, of swallowing my emotions just to keep the peace, of pretending their absence didn't break me, it all came crashing down. Noah didn't pity me. He was angry for me. And for the first time I realized he was right. It wasn't normal. It wasn't okay. I had spent my entire life trying to justify being treated like an outsider in my own family, when the truth was I should have been furious. That night, after he walked me home and kissed me good night under the Spanish moss-draped trees of my street, I stood at my front door for a long time. The porch light flickered gently in the warm Savannah air. I stared up at the stars and whispered to myself, maybe I deserve better. The decision wasn't dramatic. There was no angry outburst, no final confrontation, no declaration of war. It was quiet, deliberate, and firm. When Noah proposed to me 2 years later, I smiled and said yes without hesitation. I had dreamed of this moment, but never thought I would actually experience it with someone who made me feel safe, seen, and loved. As we sat together planning the guest list at our tiny kitchen table, I stared at the blank paper and knew immediately who would not be on it. I slid the pen away and whispered, "I'm not inviting them." Noah looked up from his laptop, surprised. "Your family." I nodded slowly. They didn't think I was important enough to be at any of their weddings, so why should they be at mine? He reached across the table and took my hand. "Are you sure?" I exhaled. Completely. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't doing it to hurt them. I was simply done pretending they mattered more to me than I ever did to them. My wedding would be different. It would be filled with people who loved and respected me, not those who showed up out of obligation. 2 months before the big day, I got the call I had been dreading. I answered my phone to hear my mom's overly sweet voice. "Hi, sweetheart. How are the wedding plans coming along?" I tensed immediately. "Good, Mom. Everything's almost done." "That's wonderful," she chirped, then paused in that deliberate way she always did before asking for something. "But your brothers and sister haven't gotten their invitations yet. Did you send them out already?" My heart raced. I stared at the countertop, gathering my courage. "I sent them," I lied calmly, "but they didn't get one because I didn't invite them." There was a heavy silence on the line. I could almost hear her jaw drop. Finally, she exploded. "What? Madeline, how could you not invite your own family? What is wrong with you?" I clenched the phone tighter, but kept my voice steady. "They never invited me to theirs, Mom. Not once. I'm returning the favor." Her voice sharpened, full of disbelief and anger. "That was different. You were young. They didn't mean to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. Well, it hurt anyway. I'm done pretending it didn't. She launched into the familiar guilt trip routine. "You're being spiteful. Family is family. You don't just shut them out like this. What will people think?" There it was, the phrase that defined my childhood. What will people think? I cut her off before she could spiral further. "I don't care what people think, Mom. It's my wedding. I'm inviting people who care about me. They didn't care enough to include me back then, so I don't see why they deserve to be there now." She hung up. I stood in my kitchen, the silence ringing in my ears, but I felt strangely at peace. That night, the group chat with my siblings lit up like a Christmas tree. Melanie was the first to message, fake concern dripping from her words. "Hey, Em, did something happen with the mail? None of us got an invite yet." Lucas followed, blunt as always. What's going on? Why aren't we invited? I stared at my phone, debating whether to reply. I wanted to tell them exactly how much their actions over the years had hurt me, how invisible and unworthy they had made me feel, how I had waited at every turn to be loved and included, only to be shut out again and again. But then I realized something even more powerful. They didn't deserve an explanation. They never had. So I let the messages sit on read. I placed my phone face down and went to join Noah at the dinner table. When he saw my face, he knew something was wrong. What happened? I slid the phone over. He read the messages and shook his head slowly. You don't owe them anything, Madeline, he said firmly. They made their choices. Now you're making yours. I smiled faintly, a small flicker of strength igniting inside me. Yeah, I know they're going to paint me as the bad guy. He leaned across and kissed my forehead. Let them. You know the truth. That's all that matters. And for the first time in my life, I believed him. At first, I thought ignoring their texts would be enough, that eventually they'd get the hint, lick their wounds quietly and move on. I underestimated just how much they needed the narrative to paint me as the villain. It started subtle. Melanie posted a passive-aggressive status on Facebook 2 days later. Family is forever, even when some people forget what that word means. I rolled my eyes so hard they nearly got stuck. Noah, scrolling beside me on the couch, glanced over and muttered, What is she, 14? I laughed bitterly, but deep down it stung more than I wanted to admit. Even after everything, part of me still wanted them to love me, to understand why I had done what I did, but they never had before. Why would they start now? The group chat started buzzing again. I had muted it weeks ago when wedding planning got intense, but no one noticed the endless pings and nudged me to check. Reluctantly, I opened the app and immediately regretted it. Melanie, it's so sad when someone prioritizes petty grudges over love. Lucas, I just don't understand. I thought we were better than this. Then Daniel, the golden eldest, weighed in with all the fake wisdom he could muster. I never realized how much bitterness you've been holding on to, Madeline. It's really sad. You're ruining relationships over things that happened years ago. My hands shook with anger as I read their words. Not one of them acknowledged what they had done. Not one apology. Not even a hint of accountability. Instead, it was me, the baby sister they had ignored and excluded, who was now ruining the family. I wanted to reply. God, I wanted to unload years of hurt and betrayal into that chat. I wanted to scream at them until they finally heard me. But deep down, I knew better. They wouldn't hear me. They never had. They would twist my words into more ammunition, spin my pain into drama, call me unstable, overdramatic, ungrateful. So instead, I did the one thing they never expected. I left the group chat. No dramatic exit message. No parting shot. Just a silent departure. And a peace I hadn't felt in years. That night, my mom called. I hesitated before answering, knowing exactly how this conversation would go. The second I picked up, she launched into it. Madeline, what is wrong with you? Your siblings are heartbroken. You're destroying this family. I let her rant for a full minute before replying flatly. They destroyed it a long time ago, Mom. I'm just finally walking away from the wreckage. She gasped like I had slapped her. You're being so spiteful, holding on to grudges, making everything about you. My patience snapped. I was 10. Mom, I said, my voice low but trembling with fury. I begged to go to Daniel's wedding. I cried because I wanted to be there. And you told me I wasn't important enough. And it happened again and again and again. You all decided back then that I didn't matter. Why should I pretend otherwise now? There was a long, stunned silence on her end. Finally, she said, her voice trembling with practiced sadness. That was years ago, Madeline. You have to let it go. Family is all you'll have in the end. I closed my eyes, feeling a strange calm wash over me. No, Mom. Family is supposed to care about you. Family doesn't leave you out when it matters most and expect you to come crawling back later. That's not love. That's control. She started crying then. Loud. Dramatic sobs meant more to manipulate than to mourn. You'll regret this one day, she choked out. You'll see. I don't think I will, I said quietly before hanging up. Over the next few days, the drama escalated. Rachel texted Noah directly, hoping he would talk some sense into me. He didn't reply. Lucas, sent me an actual email, quoting Bible verses about forgiveness and unity. I deleted it without reading past the first line. Daniel, posted another passive-aggressive gem on Facebook. Some people would rather burn bridges than build them. I muted him too. Noah pulled me into a hug one night as I sat scrolling through the mess. You know what this is, right? He said. I looked up at him, exhausted. What? They're not mad you didn't invite them. They're mad they don't control you anymore. I blinked and then smiled, because he was absolutely right. The morning of my wedding, I woke up strangely calm. There were no last-minute panics, no overwhelming jitters. But there was an odd weight sitting in my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone from my family would try to ruin it. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my little bridal suite, adjusting the delicate lace straps of my dress as the early Savannah sunlight streamed through the window. My best friend, Chloe, walked in and froze, her face breaking into a wide smile. You look incredible, Madeline, she whispered, her eyes glassy with emotion. I smiled back faintly. Thank you. Chloe tilted her head, studying me carefully. Are you okay? I hesitated. I don't know. I'm happy. I really am. But part of me still wishes they had cared enough to fight for me back then. She walked over, grabbed my hands, and squeezed tightly. You don't need their approval. You never did. Look around, Em. Today is about the people who did show up. The ones who love you the way you deserve. I nodded slowly, a lump forming in my throat. She was right. The ceremony venue was everything I had ever dreamed of, a hidden garden tucked behind an old historic mansion, the trees draped with soft strands of twinkle lights, white roses lining the cobblestone pathway. The late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden glow over everything. As the music began to play, I stepped out from behind the arched trellis and locked eyes with Noah standing at the altar. His dark suit was sharp against the backdrop of soft green leaves, but it was the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the world, that took my breath away. In that moment, every painful memory, every feeling of rejection and invisibility melted away. I wasn't the forgotten little sister anymore. I wasn't the outsider begging to be noticed. I was Madeline, a bride, a woman surrounded by people who actually loved her. As I walked down the aisle, I caught glimpses of my closest friends, my coworkers from the flower shop, a few cousins who had quietly supported me all these years. Chloe stood proudly at my side, her eyes full of pride and joy. When I reached Noah, he whispered softly, "You're stunning." I laughed quietly, blinking back tears. So are you. The vows were perfect. Noah promised to love, protect, and stand by me even when life threw its worst at us. I promised the same. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. The reception was simple but magical. We danced under the stars until our feet hurt. Our friends gave heartfelt toasts, full of funny stories and emotional wishes for our future. Noah's parents, who had welcomed me as their own from day one, pulled me into warm hugs and whispered, "We're so proud to have you in our family." At one point, I slipped away from the crowd, standing at the edge of the garden. The lights twinkled in the trees, the soft hum of music floated in the air, and laughter echoed around me. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in my life, I felt full. Whole. I had spent so many years believing the lie my family told me, that I didn't matter, that I wasn't worthy of love or inclusion. But standing there, surrounded by real friends, by people who had chosen to be part of my life, I realized the truth. I mattered to the people who actually deserved to know me. Later that night, one of my cousins pulled me aside with an awkward expression. "Hey, Madeline." I probably shouldn't say this, but I groaned, bracing myself. "What?" She winced. Your mom and Melanie threw a dinner tonight, like, as an alternative to your wedding. I stared at her for a long moment, then burst out laughing. You're kidding. She shook her head. Nope. I know it's pathetic. I just thought you should know. I smiled and shook my head. Let them. Let them throw their pity party. I hope the food was good. My cousin looked surprised I wasn't upset. But I wasn't. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty. I had made the right decision. I thought the worst of it was over. The wedding had been perfect. Everything I had ever dreamed of and more. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had closed the door on my family's drama and walked into a new chapter of peace. But if there's one thing I've learned about my family, it's that they hate being ignored. A week after the wedding, the first shot was fired. Naturally, it came from Melanie. Saw some pics from your wedding, her message read. I can't believe you had it in a garden. Looked casual, but I guess that's what you wanted. I stared at the text, stunned. After everything, she still couldn't help but twist the knife. Not even a fake congratulations. Not even basic civility. Just bitterness disguised as snobbery. I hovered over the keyboard, tempted to fire back. I wanted to say something biting. Something about how at least my wedding wasn't full of fake smiles and people who never cared. But I stopped myself. I didn't owe her, or any of them, a response. In the following days, messages began trickling in from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Apparently, Melanie, Daniel, and Lucas had launched a full-blown campaign to paint me as the ungrateful, selfish villain of the family. Aunt Evelyn, the queen of guilt trips, texted me next. Madeline, I don't know what happened between you and your siblings, but they're very hurt. Melanie says she tried to reach out and you're ignoring her. Maybe it's time to let go of the past. I sighed deeply and rolled my eyes. Noah, sitting beside me on the couch, glanced at my phone and chuckled softly. Another guilt trip? Yeah, Aunt Evelyn again. Same speech, different day. He shook his head. They're only hurt because they lost control over you. You stopped playing their game. I smiled faintly. You're not wrong. It was like they couldn't stand the fact that I had finally set a boundary they couldn't bulldoze. I had spent years begging to be included, desperate for their approval, only to be repeatedly shut out. Now that I had walked away, they were the ones chasing me, and I wasn't going back. The final straw came one lazy Sunday morning. Noah and I were still in our pajamas, making a mess of the kitchen with burnt pancakes and bad coffee, when there was a sharp knock at the door. I froze. I just knew. I opened the door to find my mother standing there, arms crossed, her face already twisted into a familiar mask of disappointment. Madeline, she said sharply, we need to talk. Noah stepped behind me, resting a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Now's not a good time, Mom, I replied coolly. She ignored me and tried to step inside. This has gone too far. Your siblings are devastated. This isn't how family should act. I clenched my jaw and kept my voice calm. You don't get to show up here and lecture me. I invited the people who love and respect me. They didn't make the cut. That's on them, not me. Her face shifted from anger to disbelief. You don't mean that. They love you, Madeline. They're your family. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. No, Mom. Family doesn't make you feel small. Family doesn't abandon you when you're a child and then demand to be part of your life when it suits them. I spent my whole life trying to prove I mattered to them. I'm done. She blinked, stunned. For once, she had no comeback. Noah stepped forward gently but firmly. I think it's time for you to leave. My mom's face hardened as she stared between us. You'll regret this, Madeline, she whispered coldly. You'll miss us one day and we won't be there. I looked at her with calm clarity. No, Mom, I won't. Noah quietly shut the door. I stood there for a long moment, expecting guilt, sadness, even anger to creep in. But all I felt was relief. The next day, the messages continued. I barely blinked when Lucas texted me. Mom said, she came to talk to you, and he slammed the door in her face. Real mature, Madeline. You've turned into someone I don't even recognize. I read it aloud to Noah, who shook his head and smiled. Block him, he said simply. You don't need that energy anymore. And I did. One by one, I blocked every number, every account, every flying monkey relative who had decided to pile onto the guilt train. For the first time in my life, I realized something powerful. I didn't owe them my time. I didn't owe them my energy. I didn't owe them an explanation. They had spent years making me feel invisible. Now I was taking back control. The weeks that followed were the quietest I had ever known. Without the constant messages, the passive-aggressive comments, the emotional landmines, I finally felt like I could breathe. Noah and I settled into married life in our cozy little Savannah apartment. We decorated together, argued playfully over throw pillows, cooked terrible meals, laughed until our sides hurt, and dreamed of what the future could be. One night, as we lay curled up on the couch watching an old black and white movie, Noah turned to me and asked softly, "Do you regret it? Not having them at the wedding?" I thought about it for a moment. No, I said firmly. I thought I would, but I don't. I spent so long trying to earn their approval. For what? They never gave it. They never even tried. I don't miss them. I don't miss feeling like I'm not enough. He smiled and squeezed my hand. Good. You deserve better. And he was right. I did deserve better. A month after the wedding, the final message came. It popped up on my phone from an unknown number. I didn't even have to guess who it was. It was Melanie. You've destroyed this family, Madeline. I hope you're happy. I stared at the screen for a second, then slowly pressed delete. I didn't even feel angry anymore. I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel anything at all. I just felt done, because I was happy. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing anyone's approval. I wasn't begging for scraps of love and attention from people who never valued me. I was surrounded by friends who had chosen me, a husband who cherished me, and a life I had built on my own terms. As I stood by the window that night watching the soft glow of streetlights over the quiet Savannah streets, I whispered to myself, "This is peace." And I smiled. I had everything I ever needed, and none of it had come from them.